Okay, so usually we start this class on Thursday with a meditation on the breath. And then following that, we do another type of meditation based on the meditations in my book, How to Meditate, which all come from the Buddhist tradition, the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. And the subject tonight we'll do is meditation on emptiness, which is quite an interesting but also challenging topic. So, so for the first part, then we'll do meditation on the breath. And what I usually do is take you through a kind of a guided relaxation of the body, going through the body with our awareness and just paying attention to whatever sensations we notice in the body, and particularly looking out for any tension. If there's tension anywhere in the body, trying to let go of that. Because if we try to meditate but there's tension in our body, then that becomes a kind of obstacle to having a good meditation. So it's good to try to relax and let go of tension as much as we can in our body before we focus on the main meditation, which will be meditation on the breath. So make yourselves comfortable. And it's a good idea, if you can, to keep your back straight during meditation, if you can. If you have some sort of back problem or back injury that may prevent you from sitting with the back straight, then you just make whatever adjustments you need to. But otherwise, sitting with a straight back helps the mind to be more clear and focused, concentrated. But at the same time, try not to have your shoulders tight and hunched. Instead, let them drop and be relaxed. And when we meditate, we might feel more comfortable closing our eyes completely. But doing that can be a little risky of sleepiness. We might find ourselves falling asleep if we close our eyes. Especially this time of the day, if you've been working and busy all day, you might be tired. And then sitting down, relaxing and closing your eyes can lead to sleepiness. And ideally, we don't want to fall asleep. We want to stay awake in meditation. So if you think you might become sleepy during the meditation, one way to sort of counteract that would be to keep your eyes open just a little bit. So this is actually what's recommended in the Tibetan tradition, meditating with your eyes partially open. And you have your eyes looking down onto the floor in front of you or onto your lap. So have them looking down. And in that way, you're not going to be seeing things in the room around that might distract you. But there's some light coming in. That's the idea. The idea is to have some light coming into our eyes, because that can help us to stay more awake and alert. Okay, so before we start, it's a good idea to set our intention or motivation as to why we're here, why we're meditating. Now, we're doing meditations based on the teachings of the Buddha. So the Buddha taught these meditation practices. And when the Buddha taught, his intention was compassion for all living beings, without leaving anybody out. So it said that a Buddha's compassion extends equally to all living beings everywhere, just because they exist. Whether they like him or not, whether they agree with him or not, that doesn't matter to the Buddha. The Buddha feels compassion for every single living being, because he can see that every being has good, positive potential lying within their mind. They have the potential to be wise and compassionate and also become enlightened. So the Buddha taught with compassion for all living beings. And if we feel inspired by that, we might also try to feel at whatever degree we can of that kind of compassion. Feeling the concern for others, wishing them to have happiness, wishing them to be free of suffering, wishing that we could help them as much as we can. So if you can, try to open up your mind, open up your heart to others, other beings, and feel how nice it would be if we could be more helpful to others. And that is possible. If we work on ourselves, if we work on our own mind and try to decrease disturbing states of mind like anger and hatred and selfishness and greed, decrease those and increase positive states of mind such as compassion and love and patience and so forth. And that's actually the real purpose of meditation in Buddhism. It's to work on our mind and try to bring about more positive states of mind and less negative ones. So if you feel comfortable with that, then you might like to think that that's why you're here. You're here doing meditation in order to bring about a more positive transformation of your own mind, which of course will make you happier. You'll be a happier person yourself. But it will also enable you to be more helpful to others, to bring more kindness, more peace, more joy, more love to other people and other beings. So try to feel, if you can, that that's why you're here. You're here to benefit not only yourself, but also to benefit others. Okay, now for the body scan. We'll start with the top of the head. So I'll just mention the different body parts and do your best to put your awareness at the place that I mention. And if you find any tension there, see if you can just let it go. Imagine it melting and flowing away, flowing out of you. So first, feel the top of your head. Notice whatever sensations there are there. Relax that area. Let go of any tension. And then move your awareness down into your forehead. Let your forehead relax. And then feel your eyes and relax all the muscles around the eyes and behind the eyes. Then feel the rest of your face, mouth and cheeks, jaw, and relax all the other muscles in the face. Let your face become smooth and relaxed. But you might like to continue having a little smile on your mouth and your lips, which can actually help you be in a more positive and relaxed state of mind. And then feel the right side of your head. Relax any tension there. And then the back of the head. And then the left side of the head. Now, see if you can go inside of your head. See if you can notice any sensations inside of your head. And relax any tension that may be there. So try to have the whole of your head, both the outside and the inside, as relaxed and free of tension as possible. But don't worry if you can't let go of all tension. There might still be some stubborn spots of tension somewhere that don't go away. But that's okay. Just do the best you can. Now move your awareness into your neck and throat. Relax those areas. And then the upper part of the back. That's an area where we often have tension, especially if you're working at a desk, working on a computer. The tension can collect in that area. So let go of any tension. You can imagine it melting and then flowing away, flowing out of you. You can imagine it going all the way down into the earth beneath us and disappearing there. And move your awareness down into the middle part of the back and do the same. Let go of any tension you find there. And the lower part of the back. Now try to have the whole of your back as light and relaxed and free of tension as you can manage. Next, move your awareness to your chest. And now we'll start to move down through the front part of the body, starting with the chest. So feel the chest, both the outside and the inside, where we have various organs like the lungs and the heart. If there's any tension in your chest, let it go. Let it melt and flow away. And let the awareness continue moving down through the middle part of your body, your torso. So relax the area of the diaphragm and the internal organs there, like the stomach. And then the lower part of the torso, the abdomen, and all the organs of the digestive system. So again, if there's any tension in those areas, imagine it melting, flowing away, flowing out of you, sinking into the earth. And then the pelvic area, including the hips and the buttocks, that whole lower part of the torso. If there's any tension, let it melt, flow away, flow out of you, sink into the earth. And now we'll do the right leg. Feel the upper part of your right leg, the thigh, and let go of any tension. Let all the muscles relax in that area. And the same with the knee. Let the knee relax. And the lower part of the right leg, the calf. Finally, the right foot, including the ankle and the foot and the toes. And now shift your awareness to the left leg. First the upper part of the leg, the thigh. And then the knee. And the lower part of the leg, the calf. And finally the right foot, ankle, foot, toes. Now shift your awareness to your right arm. First the upper part of the arm. And the elbow. And the lower part of the right arm. And the hand, right hand, including the wrist and the fingers. And then the left arm, starting with the upper part of the arm. And the elbow. And the lower arm. And finally the left hand, wrist and fingers. So now we've gone through the whole body in a quick way, trying to relax it as much as possible. So do your best to keep your body relaxed as much as possible for the rest of the time that we're meditating. Some tension might pop up in some area of the body. If it does, you can just briefly put your awareness there and tell it to relax. do whatever you can to let that area relax, let go of the tension, then go back to the breath. So mainly we're going to focus on the breath, the breathing, and you can do that in whatever way you wish, wherever, however you are able to feel the breath most easily, most naturally. You can just place your awareness there at that place and just be aware of each inhalation of the breath and each exhalation of the breath. The whole cycle. Breath coming in, then maybe there's a brief pause, and then the breath going out, and again there might be a brief pause, then it comes in again, and so on. And do this in a relaxed way, not trying to control your breathing, force your breathing, but just let the breath happen, let the body breathe in a natural way. Sometimes the breath might be longer or deeper. Sometimes it might be shorter, more shallow. That's okay. The body knows how much air it needs to bring in. So just allow the body to breathe naturally, just with your mind, your awareness in a very light way, in a subtle way. Just pay attention to or be aware of the breath as it's coming in and then going out. And use the breath as a kind of focal object or kind of anchor, keeping your mind in the present, the here and now, rather than wandering away and thinking about the past or the future or other places and so on. So those kinds of thoughts will come up inevitably. That's just the way the mind is. So you can't stop the thoughts from coming up, but you can learn or train yourself to not follow the thoughts. Or if you do follow the thoughts, to then let them go and come back to the breath. So whenever you notice your mind has wandered away from the breath and is thinking about something else, doing something else, paying attention to something else, as soon as you realize that, just let go of that other thought or object and come back to the breath. Come back to the present moment, the present place, right here, right now. Aware of the breath coming in and going out. And try to maintain the state of mind that we started with, a mind of kindness, compassion, care, friendliness towards yourself, towards others, and also towards your own mind and thoughts and whatever goes on in your mind. So try not to be judgmental, negative, critical, harsh towards yourself, towards your mind. Try to have a completely non-judgmental attitude about whatever comes up in your mind, not saying this is good, this is bad. Whatever comes up in your mind is just a thought, just a mental state, like a bubble or a cloud or a wave. It just comes and goes. It's not permanent, doesn't last. It just appears and then it disappears. So getting unhappy or upset or judgmental about the things that come up in the mind doesn't help. It just makes our mind more disturbed, more busy. So try to just let the thoughts come and let them go without judging them and just keep coming back to the breath. not to see the breath as something boring, uninteresting. Each breath is unique. It's one of a kind. Each breath is different from the one before and the one that comes after. And each breath means we are alive. If we stop breathing, we're dead. So the breath is actually very precious, very important, very significant. And we can learn a lot about ourselves, about our mind, by watching the breath. And just seeing what are the kinds of thoughts and memories dance through our mind. Just watching them come, watching them go. But mainly staying on the breath, using the breath as a kind of anchor to stay in the present. Now, if some emotion comes up in your mind when you're meditating, it could be irritation or even outrage, anger, or it could be fear or anxiety or sadness, depression, or whatever. And if you try to let it go and it doesn't go, but it keeps coming back, then one thing you can do is to just let it be there. Don't try to push it away. Let it be there and just observe it. Observe it in a neutral, objective way without being caught up in it, getting all involved in it and overwhelmed by it, but also not judging it or trying to push it away. Instead, just allow it to be there. Make your mind very open and spacious and allow that energy of the emotion to be there. And just watch it, just observe it. Have an attitude of kindness and acceptance, non-judgmentalness, friendliness, and just see what you can learn from it. See what that emotion has to tell you. So, in case you didn't understand what I said at the end about an emotion, I'll just explain that a little more. This is actually related to what we were talking about last week. Some of you were here last week. Last week, in the second part of the session, we were looking at anger or hatred, which, according to Buddhism, is it's a disturbing emotion, a disturbing state of mind. It can also be called a negative state of mind because it disturbs our mind, makes our mind unpeaceful, and it can also lead to suffering and problems, both for ourselves and others, if we're not careful how we deal with it. And it's also a problem in meditation, because while we're meditating, if anger comes up, it can take over our mind, and our mind gets very disturbed and unpeaceful, and then very messy. We can't meditate properly if we're angry. And so we were looking at different ways of dealing with anger, managing anger. So in Buddhism, there's lots and lots, hundreds, we could say, of different methods. or we'd say tools that we can use for working on anger. And we just looked at a few last week. For example, when you're angry at another person, one thing that's very helpful is what we this expression that we have of putting yourself in the other person's shoes. In other words, trying to understand the other person, what's going on with them, where they're coming from, and so on. That can be very, very helpful, because otherwise it's so easy for us. We see a person and we see them acting a certain way, talking a certain way, exhibiting certain kind of attitudes, and then we feel judgmental, critical. Yeah, what a lousy person. But if we were to see that person's story, what happened to them in their life from the time they were born, we, we could see that the whole story of that person's life and what they've been through, what they've experienced, and so forth, then we might have a different view, a different feeling towards the person. We might understand, why they're behaving that way. Not always, but sometimes it's like that. Because sometimes people go through some really bad experiences, especially as children. Some children are treated really horribly by their parents, have really horrible experiences in their life, and that affects them, that shapes them, that influences them so that they behave the way that they do now. So that's something that can be very helpful. Not always, but sometimes very helpful in cooling down the fire of anger and aversion and criticalness and judgmentalness. It can help soften our heart towards other people and, enable us to have more compassion rather than anger towards somebody. So that's one very helpful method. Another one is checking to see if what it is you don't like about the other person might be something you have in yourself, like the mirror. I call this the mirror method. Is the other person a mirror for me, showing me something about myself that I don't like? In my experience, this usually works. I usually find within myself something, it may not be exactly the same, but similar to what I see in the other person. And that's actually why the other person pushes my buttons so much. Because you may have noticed this, that something you find irritating about another person, somebody else isn't bothered by that. Have you ever noticed that? That just drives me absolutely crazy. But somebody says, "Hey, what's the big deal?" they don't feel bothered by that. So then it's very interesting to look at that. So why does that irritate me so much? Why do I have such a hard time with that? It's got something to do with me, something to do with my mind. And this can be really disturbing, when you see, wow, I'm like that too. We don't want to be like that. But if we are really, really honest, really deeply honest with ourselves, and we can see, yeah, I am like that, then what we need to do is stop hating that in ourselves, because that's really the problem. It's like we hate that part of ourselves. We don't like it. We don't accept it. We want it to go away. And so when we see it in somebody else, we feel the same way. I don't like that. I hate that. Go away. So the solution is to accept, instead of rejecting that part of ourselves, to accept it. It's not easy, of course. It could take a long time. But if you can slowly work on accepting, okay, that's there in me. I don't like it, but that's how it is. And once the interesting thing is, once you can accept that thing in yourself, then it becomes more possible to change, to work on it. Whereas if you're constantly rejecting it, hating it, wishing it wasn't there, trying to push it away, it's like fighting with it. And then you can't really change yourself. But being able to change yourself, starts with accepting yourself as you are. So it's worth working at it, even if it's hard. And you can change. You can change that attitude and eventually get to where you can accept that thing in yourself. I know it's possible. I've done this many times. So accepting that in yourself, and that means you can then work on it and change yourself. And when you can accept it in yourself, then you can accept it in others as well. You won't be so angry and annoyed and irritated when you see it showing up in somebody else. So that's a really, really helpful method for working with anger towards another person. And then I also spoke about, but I don't think we did a meditation on this, this method of just letting the anger or whatever the disturbing emotion is, letting it be there in your mind and just observing it. Now, this is tricky to do. It's hard to do because our usual tendency is either to want to push it away, go away, I don't like it, leave me alone, get rid of it, That's one tendency we have. The other tendency is to just get totally absorbed in it, totally caught up in it, totally involved with it. Yeah. So this thing I'm talking about, I'm just letting it be there in the mind and watching it with a non-judgmental way. So that's kind of in between those other two attitudes. It means neither pushing it away, hating it, nor getting totally caught up in it. So in between those is just letting it be without pushing it away or getting caught up in it, just letting it be there in your mind and watching it. It's tricky. It's hard to do, but if you can do it, it's very, very helpful. And what I find when I'm able to do this is that it just kind of, well, sometimes it just dissipates. It just goes away by itself. Other times, what happens is I recognize that there's something else underneath. It's like it sort of opens up, and then you see something else down there. Like if it's anger, underneath anger, you might have fear. You might have sadness, very, very, very deep sadness, very like hurt. You've been hurt very badly. The anger is just a cover up for that. So it's really interesting when you can do this because you learn something about yourself. You learn things about yourself, about your mind that you may not have seen before. And also, if you can do this, you learn to be more accepting, more caring, more loving, more compassionate towards yourself and towards these painful and often what we consider undesirable aspects of ourselves. So that's what I was talking about at the end of the meditation tonight. I said if some emotion comes up and you can't just let it go, it doesn't go, or it does go, but then it comes back. So sometimes that happens in meditation. There's this really nagging emotion there that just doesn't want to go away. So instead of continuously trying to let it go and come back to your breath, then this is something else you can do. Okay, just let it come. Let it be there and just observe it. Thich Nhat Hanh says something really beautiful. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese master, he says, like talking about anger, he says, hold it in your arms like a crying baby, which is so beautiful. It's not at all what we want to do. We don't want to hold our anger like a little baby crying. But if you can do that, it's very helpful. It's very, very powerful. Like I say, either you learn something about it or it just calms down, stops crying, goes away. And you can do that with other emotions as well, like I say, with fear, anxiety, irritation, depression, sadness. So whatever disturbing emotion there is that comes up in your mind during meditation and you can't just let it go, so this is something else you could try. So now, tonight I wanted to move on to another method for working with anger, but also any other disturbing emotion. This is a meditation on emptiness. And emptiness, the term emptiness, sometimes it's also called voidness or selflessness. Shunyata is the Sanskrit term. So this is a term used in Buddhism for the true nature of everything, the actual way that things exist. And according to Buddhism, this actual way that things exist is there. It's there in everything, in ourselves and our bodies and other people and all the things in the world around us. So this true nature of things is there, but we don't see it. It's as though we are blind to it. And it's because we don't see the true nature of things, we are blind to the true nature of things, that we get caught up in all the other disturbing emotions, like anger and fear and attachment, greed, selfishness, jealousy, pride. So all the disturbing emotions happen because we don't see the true nature of things. So according to Buddhism, that's our basic problem. That's the root of all problems, all suffering, both our own personal problems, but also all the problems in the world, war and natural disasters and crime and poverty and hunger and so on. All these problems are really rooted in what's called ignorance in Buddhism. Ignorance doesn't mean not having an education. It means not seeing the true nature of things. You could have a PhD, you could have several PhDs, and still have ignorance about the true nature of things. But this topic is very tricky. It's very difficult. Um, and to really understand it requires quite a bit of time and energy. Like in the monasteries in the Tibetan tradition, they study many other subjects first, usually for 12 years or sometimes longer. They study kind of basic subjects, and then they usually spend about 4 years or more studying just emptiness, just studying emptiness, studying some very hard texts from the ancient Indian masters, and debating about it and meditating on it and so on. So it's kind of like PhD level in the Buddhist monastic curriculum. So realistically, if we really want to understand it and really want to get not just an intellectual understanding of it, but an actual experience of it, a realization of it, it is something we need to put time and energy into. But it's worth it because this is the ultimate solution to our suffering, to our problems. Understanding emptiness and realizing emptiness is the way to wipe out all our problems and all our suffering. So I'm introducing it here tonight just as we can take little steps towards an understanding of emptiness and using it, and it can be used as a way of dealing with disturbing emotions. Now, the way to, I'll talk about it a little and then we can do some meditation after the break. One way we can do this is by just examining our own sense of self or I. Because whenever we have an emotion, we're angry or we're frustrated or we're frightened or upset or whatever, there's some emotion going on. Underneath the emotion or behind the emotion, there's a feeling of I. I am angry. I am frightened. I am frustrated. I am this. I am that. There's this feeling of an I who experiences that emotion. And I think most of the time, most people never question this I. We just kind of go through life assuming that we know who we are. We know how we exist. Yeah. I am here. I am real. And you have infringed on my rights. So I have the right to be angry at you and hit you in the face or whatever. So we just kind of blindly go along with the feeling of I and never question, well, does it really exist? Is it really there? Do I really know who I am and how I am and so on? So Buddhism asks us to, check this, to investigate this, to look into this feeling of an I. Is it really there? Do I really exist the way I think I do? Does the I exist the way it appears to? And so we'll do a meditation on this afterwards. But According to Buddhism, the Buddhist explanation, which I don't think is so off or different than the scientific explanation of things, we have a body, and our body is made up of many, many different parts. Gross parts like our skin and bones and organs and so forth. And then at a finer level, a subtler level, there are cells, and then even subtler level molecules, atoms, subatomic particles. They keep coming up with more finer and finer little particles of things. So there's probably billions or maybe trillions, uncountable number of parts in our body if you consider the very, very, very tiny parts. So that's what our body is. It's just made up of all these billions or trillions of parts. It's just a mass of these small parts or particles. Um, so so what about I? This feeling of I. Can we find that in among these parts, and among all the molecules and atoms of our body? Is there an I somewhere in there? I, capital I, not this kind of I, but capital I, Yai. Yeah, I heard. I don't know. Yeah, there was one physicist, one quite well-known physicist, who said this in a film that in the past, among say neuroscientists, yeah, neuroscientists, I think that's the word. Yeah, those who study the brain, they used to have the idea that there was one part of the brain which was kind of the central. I don't know what to call it, like the CEO, the one in charge of everything, the part of the brain that ran the show, that directed everything, the rest of the body. Yeah, central headquarters, the president, the CEO, the prime minister, whatever. So they thought, they had this theory that somewhere in the brain there was something that was in charge and making everything else work, the rest of the brain, the rest of the body, and so on. And they were looking for that, and they never found it, and they gave up looking. I mean, if it's going to be anywhere, it would be in the brain. It wouldn't be our nose. It wouldn't be our heart. So, usually it seems that, yeah, it's the brain that runs everything, and some part of the brain runs everything else. But it seems that's not the case. Okay, so there really isn't something in our body, anywhere in our body, that is like the director or the central command, the central headquarters that's running the rest of the body. But we can still, think about that and investigate that for ourselves. Because the Buddha always said that. He said, don't just blindly believe things, what other people say, even if it's the Buddha himself, or even if it's the greatest scientist in the world, or Einstein. So we shouldn't just believe blindly what others say, and instead investigate things. Always have doubt and question and investigate things for ourselves. So this is actually the Buddhist way. The Buddhist way is to investigate, to look for. So we feel like there's an I, a capital I, a sense of I or me. We feel that it's there somewhere within us. But if that is so, if that is true, where is it? What is it? Can we find it? Can we point to it? And then, according to Buddhism, we aren't just a body, we're not just a brain, we aren't just a mass of cells, but we also have a mind. And our mind, according to Buddhism, is not a physical thing. It's not something we can physically locate anywhere in our body. Instead, it's a non-physical kind of energy. And a lot of scientists don't believe this, don't accept that, but some do. They're still investigating. They're still trying to figure out this whole idea of mind or consciousness, what it is, where it is, how it exists, and so on. But according to Buddhism, it's a non-physical kind of energy or phenomena. It's that, like when we meditate, when we're meditating, it's our mind that's meditating. That's, watching our breath, watching whatever else is going on. And of course, all the thoughts, the memories, the perceptions that are popping up, coming and going all the time. Those are part of our mind. Those are aspects of our mind. But our mind is always doing something. Whether we're meditating or not, our mind is thinking, it's hearing, it's feeling, it's having emotions, it's making plans, it's remembering past events, and even when we're asleep at night, it's dreaming, coming up with all these crazy dreams. And even when we're in a state of unconsciousness, like a coma or deep sleep without dreams, even then, mind is still there, experiencing something. According to Buddhism, it's always experiencing something. It's always going. So that might be another place where we could look for the I. Maybe it's in the mind. Maybe it is the mind or a part of the mind. So that's another thing to check. Because according to Buddhism, our mind is not just one thing. It's not like a machine sitting inside of us somewhere that's thinking and remembering and feeling. It's more like a flow, like a river or a stream. It's made up of all the different experiences that we have, which are coming and going, arising and passing, always changing every minute, every second, every nanosecond. There's different experiences that are coming and going in our mind. It's not just one whole, partless thing. The mind is a flow, a stream of these different experiences. So if we think, well, maybe that's the I, maybe my mind is the I, or the I is in my mind, then we need to look for that. We need to investigate that. Because, again, the mind isn't just one thing. It's just a stream, coming, going, coming, going. So how can we find a sense of I within the mind? Because our I, the feeling of I, seems to be something that's always there and not changing. Something kind of solid and continuous. Like, for example, if we think about yesterday or even this morning, think about something we did this morning, you might notice you have the feeling I'm the same person here as I was this morning having breakfast or driving my car or my bicycle or whatever it is you did this morning. You have the feeling I'm the same person. I'm the same person now as I was this morning. I'm the same person who walked in the door an hour ago or so. We feel that way, don't we? I walked in the door an hour ago. Okay? The I who is sitting here and the I who walked in the door an hour ago, it's the same. Don't you think? We feel that way? That's our kind of gut level feeling without thinking about it. Yeah? And everything else we do, we tend to feel it's the same I who does all these things. Okay? That means there's a sense of the I being unchanging, being one thing that goes through time and doesn't change. So if we compare that sense of I, the kind of gut level innate sense of I that we have, we compare that with what the mind is and how it's just changing all the time, coming, going. Nothing is the same from one moment to the next. They don't quite match. So then, I mean, this is an investigation one needs to do on your own, but I'm just explaining how you can do it. So then it's hard to really point to the mind or something within the mind as being this solid, continuous, permanent I. So even if we don't come up with an answer to this question, just doing the investigation itself has quite an effect on our mind. And it said this is something you can do, especially when you're feeling emotional, if you're feeling angry. Although at the time we're angry, when we're actually caught up in our anger, we're focused so much on out there, whatever it is, whoever it is we're angry at. We're really focused on that and, wanting to argue or fight or defend ourselves or whatever. So that's quite difficult at that point in time to then sit down and say, so who is this I that's angry? what is this I that's angry? Does it really exist the way it appears? But if you could, it's very effective. Yeah. It's a bit like pulling the rug out from under the anger. You know that expression? We have that expression in English. Pulling the rug out from under something. It's just like it's got nothing to stand on. Yeah. Investigating the I that's angry kind of pulls the ground out from under the anger. And the anger just kind of dissipates. So that's why it's a very helpful way of working with emotions. Instead of trying to deal with the emotion itself, you kind of sneak under it, behind it. Hey, who do you think you are that's being angry? You know, who are you anyway who's angry? What are you? Do you really exist? Are you really there? So like I say, even if you don't answer that question, that the emotion itself kind of may not completely go away, but it's not as powerful, not as strong as it was before. And you're left kind of scratching your head and wondering, yeah, is it true? Who am I that's getting angry? And you can also another way of using this idea of emptiness is to investigate the object of the anger. This person you're angry at, or this thing that you're angry at. Does that exist the way it appears? Is it, because it seems so real and so solid, so out there, like a real thing that's so annoying, so irritating, so horrible, so deserving of your anger. So investigate that. Try to see, do I really see that object the way it exists? The way I see it, is it true? So doing that can also be very helpful. So we'll do this after the break. We'll have a break and then um, try out some meditation on these ideas. It's kind of fun. Okay, so let's have 10-minute break, and there's refreshments, drinks, and cookies upstairs. So let's try out meditation on what I was talking about just now. So, what I'll do is I'll ask you to remember a time when you felt some emotion. Sorry, didn't get it. I had it okay before. Now okay. So I'll ask you to try to remember a time when you felt some emotion, or maybe you have some emotion in your mind now that you could use, and then I'll just lead you through a little investigation of the sense of I that lies sort of beneath or behind the emotion, underneath the emotion. So get into a comfortable position. But try to sit with a straight back. Might still be relaxed as much as possible. And if you are feeling sleepy, you could keep your eyes open a little, looking down on the floor in front of you, just so there's some light coming in that can help you to stay awake. But that's not necessary. So if you find it uncomfortable or difficult keeping your eyes partially open, it's okay to let them close. And just let the breath flow in and out in a natural rhythm. And if there's any thoughts in your mind that aren't related to what we're doing, like if you're thinking about your next plans for tonight or tomorrow, put those aside for now. Decide to just stay focused on the meditation that we're doing to the best of your ability. So now try to recall a time when you felt an emotion. Maybe it's better not to think of the hugest, biggest, worst emotion you've ever had, but just some feeling of anger or irritation or worry or unhappiness. Preferably something that's relatively recent. So it's still fresh in your mind. You can remember it easily. Might be easiest to think of a time when you felt kind of angry or irritated because somebody did something you didn't like. It doesn't even have to be somebody you know. It could be some public figure like a politician. That kind of thing happens a lot, doesn't it? So try to bring that emotion to mind and just focus on the emotion itself, that experience of feeling the anger or irritation or whatever it was. And now, in a kind of subtle way, a bit like, let's say you're a photographer and you want to take a photograph of some birds or wildlife in nature. So you want to do it in a really kind of quiet, subtle way so that you don't scare the animals away. So, in that kind of way, see if you can look underneath or behind this emotion and catch a glimpse of the feeling of I who is angry or irritated or upset or whatever. So what you might notice is that there is a feeling of an I somewhere inside of us that seems to be really there, not just imaginary, but a real thing, and always there, always the same, continuous day and night. I am this. I feel that. I think that. I like this. I don't like that. So now the question is, does this I really exist? Does it exist the way we think it does? Is it a real thing? If it's true, if it does exist, if it's really there, then when we try to look for it or investigate it, analyze it, then it should become more and more clear, more and more obvious. Its truth, its reality will just become stronger and stronger. So, one way to do this kind of investigation is to just look at what is there, like our body. We know we have a body, our body is very much there, very much here. And we also know that our body is made up of lots of different things: skin, blood, bones, different organs, muscles. So just take a bit of time thinking about what your body is made up of, all the different parts, and ask yourself if you can locate the sense of I, this real solid I, somewhere in your body. Can you point to some part of your body and say, that is the I, that is me? Now, in case you do think that some part of your body is the I, like you might think your brain is the I, or you might think your heart is the I. And let's do a reality check on that. For example, when we get up in the morning and we go into the bathroom and we stand in front of the mirror and we look in the mirror And we might have thoughts like, oh, I look terrible, or I look pretty good. So when we have that thought, I look bad or I look good when looking in the mirror, are we looking at our brain or our heart? Is that what we see in the mirror? A brain, a heart? And then we think, oh, I look pretty good. That brain looks pretty good. That heart looks pretty good. On the other hand, some of you might think, no, I don't think any part of my body is the I. That's just physical matter. That's not me. My mind, my consciousness, that's who I am. That's my I. So let's investigate that. The Buddhist explanation of our mind or consciousness is that it is not just one thing, it's always the same, but it's a stream, like a stream. It's a non-physical kind of energy, but it's like a stream in that it's always changing. Just like a stream is made of particles, molecules of water, always moving and changing. The mind is a stream made of different mental states, with different thoughts and memories and perceptions and many, many different states of mind, changing every moment, arising and passing, arising and passing. So there's not one thing in our mind which is fixed or always the same, always there without changing. And this is something we can see for ourselves when we meditate. We watch our mind and see how every moment it's changing, made of different things, different mental states. So if we think the I, the feeling of I, me, is the mind, then if we look at the mind and look at all these different mental states, which one is the I? Is there one part of our mind, one thing in the mind we can point to and say, that is the I, that is me? For example, we might think our thoughts are me. I am my thoughts, like Descartes. I think, therefore I am. So we might have that idea. Thoughts are me. But look at that more carefully, because thoughts are not fixed. Thoughts come and go. One thought comes and then goes, another thought comes and it goes, then another thought comes and then it goes. So how can we say thoughts are I if we have the sense of a kind of solid, continuous I? And also, if we say something like, I think, jag tänker. So we're saying there's actually two things there. There's I and there's thinking. That means we don't actually see our I as our thoughts. We see our I as something that has thoughts or that thinks thoughts, something other than the thoughts themselves. So then what is it? What is that I that thinks or that feels, that remembers, that understands or doesn't understand? What is it? So, in case some of you might have the thought, well, maybe there's no I at all. Maybe I don't exist at all. That's actually not true. We do exist. We are here. We have a body made of all these different parts, changing every moment. We also have a mind, excuse me, made of different parts, different mental experiences coming and going, changing all the time. So there's this mass or collection of physical things and mental things moving through time and space, constantly changing, never the same from one moment to the next. And on top of or in relation to this mass of physical and mental components, we we call this I. We just say I, or whatever your name may be, the name your parents gave you or the name you gave yourself, whatever, just a name. So I is just named or labeled onto this mass of physical and mental parts. It's nothing more than that. So this is not easy to understand, not easy to experience. It's quite challenging, but even if we get a little bit of a taste, a little sense of it, can be very helpful in dealing with our emotions. Because if we can understand there's no fixed, solid, real me or I that seems to be there, then our emotions calm down, cool down. We're not so strong, not so powerful, not so overwhelming. And instead, we can see that our emotions are just part of our mind, just states of mind that arise and pass like clouds in the sky. We can watch them come, watch them go, and know that we don't have to act on them. We don't have to get involved in them. So I mentioned earlier we use the term emptiness in Buddhism to refer to the true nature of things. And this term can be a little confusing. Sometimes people think it means nothing exists. There's no I at all. There's no me. There's no body, no mind, no world. It's all empty, nothing. So that's not correct. Emptiness doesn't mean nothingness. Instead, it means things do exist. I exist, you exist, the world exists. But things are empty of or missing a certain type of existence, a certain mode of existence, which we normally think is there. Like we believe, like in our, we're just looking at ourselves. We believe it's not like something deliberately or consciously. It's more like an innate, instinctive, intuitive sense of an I, a real me in here somewhere. So we have that experience. But then when we look for that I, we can't find it. So we are actually empty of that kind of I. We're empty of that I. But that doesn't mean we don't exist. We do. We're here. There's a body here. It's taking up space. It gets hungry. It gets thirsty. It walks around and does things and goes to sleep at night and so on. So this body exists. And we have a mind. Always busy thinking this and that and doing this and that and feeling different emotions. So these things do exist. But there being a real solid I somewhere in this body mind complex, that doesn't exist. That's the thing that's empty. Yeah. Does that make sense? A little bit? It's important because people do get the wrong idea. They hear about emptiness, they read about emptiness, and they think, oh, that means I don't exist. I'm not really here. And you're not really there either. And the world isn't really there. And they can get really messed up by thinking that way. They can end up in a mental hospital. It does happen. I mean, I'm laughing about it, but it does happen. People do sometimes really get it wrong, and it's not a good thing. So we do have to be very careful that when we think about emptiness or try to understand emptiness, we don't end up just like totally negating everything. That's called nihilism. Nihilism. That's very dangerous. So we don't want to go there. So we do want to maintain some sense of conventional existence, relative existence, conventional existence. Things are there. They just don't exist the way they normally appear, the way we normally think. So we want to kind of remove a false mode of existence from what is there. Clear that one away. Get rid of that. Any questions?
Oh, can I ask you the name again of the American that you said had talked about the soul or something?
Robert Thurman.
From
Thurman. He's quite well known. He's the father of Uma Thurman.
Father of,
Uma Thurman.
oh yeah.
Yeah, she's probably more famous than her father, but he was there first. And yeah, he's quite well known in the Buddhist world because he's a professor and he's written a lot of books, translated a lot of books. He's really brilliant.
Is there any book of his you'd recommend on that subject? Soul?
Well, the book in which he mentioned that is actually a translation of the Tibetan Book of the Dead.
Oh,
He made I mean, there's a number of different translations of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, but he did one translation and he wrote this very long introduction to the Tibetan Book of the Dead in which he kind of explained the body, the mind, the subtle and gross levels of the body and mind and so on. So it's in there that I was quite surprised to come across the term soul. He used the word soul. Whoa. Talking about this subtle, very, very subtle level of mind.
so would that be like in the translate? It'd be in one of his, like called the translation of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or
I think it's just called a Tibetan Book of the Dead. I think that's the title of the book.
with him as the
Uh,
introduction.
well, yeah, as the translator. I haven't read too many of his other books, so yeah, I can't remember. I can't really recommend. He has a very interesting way of translating as well. He uses kind of his own different terminology than other translators do. So it's sometimes a little confusing trying to figure out what he's saying. He has this, oh, it's wild. You'd love it. He has really wild terminology, like Buddhify.
Oh, yes.
He says, we Buddhify ourselves. In other words, we become enlightened. Instead of saying becoming enlightened, he says Buddhified. He was Buddhified.
Yeah.
And Buddhaverse. A
Oh, yeah.
Buddhaverse. A
Buddhaverse.
Buddhaverse.
Buddhaverse. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's quite a funny guy.
Does he come from a Christian background originally or a Buddhist?
I don't know what background he has, but he became a Buddhist quite early on and was even a monk for a little while. And fluent in Tibetan, very brilliant, amazing knowledge. You can probably find some YouTubes. He, he
He
talks
sounds
on
very
YouTubes. I
interesting.
think I think he'd like. He has. One time I was present when he was translating for one lama. I was sitting right in front of him, in fact, and he has, I think he has a glass eye. I think he must have lost an eye at one point. So he has one eye that's glass, and it's kind of looking. It's hard to tell which eye. His eyes are looking in different directions. A little hard to tell which eye is you look at. Which eye is the one he sees with, and which one is glass. Anyway, that was just yeah,
Okay, thank you for that.
yeah, Thomas.
That very subtlest level of mind mentioned.
Mm.
How is that? How is that normally described? I find it hard sometimes, like talk and reflect about emptiness, and then grasp like what it is, what aspect of mind it is that appears that we supposedly carry on and that continues
Hmm.
after death.
Well, I mean, within Buddhism, there's actually different schools, different traditions that explain things differently. So not all Buddhists agree about everything. So when you start to really get into Buddhism in details, you get, wow, there isn't just one way of explaining things that everybody agrees with. So it gets kind of confusing, complicated. So this point about the very subtle level of mind is actually, I think, as far as I know, it's only found in Tantra, the Tantric teachings, but not in the other traditions. So the other traditions would have other ways of explaining what it is that continues after we die. Some of them say it's just the mental consciousness as opposed to the sense. So we have, like, they say we have six consciousnesses related to our five senses: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. And then the mental consciousness includes our thoughts and our memories and our emotions. So it's more the internal sort of aspects of our mind. So they say it's one type of mental consciousness that continues to exist after our body dies. And that's what takes rebirth, that's what carries the karmic seeds into the future, and so on. And then one Buddhist school called the Chittamatra, or mind only school, has a very interesting explanation. They differ from the other Buddhist school. They talk about a completely another aspect of mind. They call it the alaya vijnana, or the, sometimes it's translated as storehouse consciousness. And it's said to be one aspect of the mind which like a storehouse, a treasure chest. Everything gets stored there. All our karmic seeds and everything are stored there. And that is what continues to the next life. So different Buddhist schools have different explanations, but it's only in Tantra. But since Tantra was, pervasive in Tibet, like everybody in Tibet, I think everybody, or 99% of the people were practicing Tantra and studied and practiced Tantra. So they all believed in this subtle level of mind. And So they say that is the thing. It's not something we are normally aware of. It only manifests at certain moments. For example, when we die, this is the moment of death, but also at other moments, they say when we have orgasm or we faint or we sneeze, certain moments. Also, when we go to sleep at night, they say every night when we go to sleep, our mind goes through a kind of change, a transformation from a more gross level to a more subtle level. So just before going to sleep, we also have this very momentary experience of the subtle mind, but most people don't realize it because we're so unaware. So that most of the time we're not aware of our subtle level of mind, but they say with practice, with yogic practice, meditation practice, it is possible to get in touch with it and make it more manifest and then even utilize it. So it's not something we normally experience in our daily life unless you're a highly accomplished yogi. Um, and but because everybody talks about it in the Tibetan tradition and has great explanations of it, so they seem to know they know it quite well. They're quite aware of it. So I don't know if that's answering your question.
Yeah, that gives some. I mean, it's still immensely hard to grasp,
Yeah,
but
yeah, it is.
but it helps.
Mm. But you can find more explanations about it in, for example, books. I don't know. There's a book. I don't know if it's here. I have a copy of it. It's called. I can't even remember the name. It's by the Dalai Lama, and it's about the nature of the mind, the clear light nature of the mind. So I can loan it to you if you want. So in there he explains it. Yeah.
Um, I think with this meditation, emptiness of the self, the the most difficult part is actually the very first part, to get a strong sense of the I,
Mm.
especially because like we know from the beginning that that's what we're going to find out is not there. So it's like we know the conclusion, then we have to like trick ourselves in the beginning
Yeah.
that it's actually there. I find that quite hard to get a very strong sense of this I. Tips on how to get it.
Well, I think realistically, they say you really do need to spend quite a bit of time getting to know yourself, getting to know your mind and your experiences. And it's probably best if it's in a retreat situation, so you're not so busy all day long and so on. But if you're in a retreat situation, so your mind becomes much more calm and quiet, and then you just take time. Don't like, I mean, ideally, we did it all in one go, but they say ideally it's good to just take your time and really get to know that sense of self, that sense of I, without immediately pouncing on it and saying, you're not really there, you don't really exist. But they actually say, get in touch with it and then kind of pump it up, let it reveal itself and let it become really really strong and vivid before you go on to then investigate it, because they say even if we do get a sense of the self of I, a sense of the sorry, get in touch with a sense of I, then as soon as we start to investigate it, it will disappear. It will vanish. It will kind of hide. It will go in hiding. So they say it's best to let it become really strong and really clear and really vivid before uh, starting to then refute it or negate it or analyze it. So it is realistically, it's a long-term process. In fact, apparently in one text, meditation manual, they say yogis in retreat will usually spend about a year at least just trying to get in touch with that false sense of I. So we were just kind of doing a simulation of the kind of meditation that one does. So I was just doing this to give you an idea, to sort of dangle a carrot in front of you of what's available, what's possible. But yeah, in reality, it's quite a long process. But maybe not. Maybe for some people, I think if somebody has studied and meditated on the topic in previous lives and that has very strong connection with it and be able to get it quite quickly. So everybody's different. Yeah. For some, it might take longer. For some, it might be very fast. And there's a book. It's quite nice. If you're interested in more about this subject, it's called How to See Yourself as You Really Are. Great title. Um, and it's teachings given by the Dalai Lama, but translated and edited by Jeffrey Hopkins. Actually, he's the best one for anything about emptiness. Jeffrey Hopkins. Um, he's another American who started learning Buddhism when he was still in university, and he's really brilliant. Tibetan Sanskrit scholar, professor. He's done lots of translations, written lots of books, mainly on emptiness. His main subject is emptiness. Um, so that's a really helpful book, How to See Yourself as You Really Are, because he put it into relatively easy English and very nicely arranged, by chapters. And then at the end of each chapter, you'll have the main points and also some meditations on how to meditate on it. So I think that's one of the best books on this topic if you're interested. So we're we're at the end of our time. Everyone looks very thoughtful. So they say that, of course, I mean, it can be quite difficult to understand emptiness, but they say any effort we make to think about it, well, of course, first we have to hear about it and read about it and then think about it and meditate on it. So any little bit of effort we make to try to understand emptiness is really valuable, really precious. It really starts to break down the foundations, the solid foundations of our suffering situation, this, unenlightened and suffering situation that we are in. Emptiness is the thing that really starts to crumble this edifice of suffering that we are in. So it's good to feel good about that and not worry, oh, I find it really hard. I mean, for me personally, when I first started hearing about emptiness, I didn't understand anything. I didn't know what they were talking about. It was like they were talking Chinese or Russian or something. Very, very hard. So it took me years before I started to get a little bit of understanding of it. So don't worry if you find it confusing or you feel like you don't understand it. Don't get unhappy about that, but just feel, well, I'm starting to get a little bit of understanding. And the more I learn, the more I read and listen and think about it, meditate, it will start to become more and more clear. And it's a very powerful thing, very precious and very powerful. So let's finish by dedicating what we've done here tonight, the meditations, and the talk, and thinking about it, meditating on it, which is such a precious, such a powerful, beneficial topic. So we have definitely created some good energy here tonight, some positive energy. And especially since we started with a good motivation of wanting to benefit ourselves and others as much as possible. So then that makes everything we did here tonight really good, really positive and beneficial. So let's share this positive energy with others, with all living beings, with the wish that it will bring peace and happiness and freedom from suffering and problems, and especially the very root of all suffering and problems, ignorance, not seeing the true nature of things. So may it help to bring about a complete removal of all these problems and their causes for ourselves and others, and help us all get closer to enlightenment, state of the greatest peace and happiness, freedom from suffering. fulfillment of our highest potential. Okay, thank you.